Hello, my name is Rich Howard, owner of Architectural Builder Supply, and this video is to bring you a closer look at the Don Joe number HR-100. This is a hinge reinforcement plate is what it is, made of steel. They say raw steel. That's true because there's no prime coat on it. Probably going to be a little bit of oil on it, and that would be typical, and you do see some evidence of it on the back here. A little bit of oil that's going to be on there. This piece of equipment is relatively unusual, and what I mean by that is while it's a hinge reinforcing plate, the HR100 is specifically used for 3.5 inch size hinges, height hinges. The telltale sign of that is that there are only 3 screws here, so depending on the handing, they'll give you 6 holes. Depending on the handing of the door or the frame, you're going to utilize only 3 of those 6 drilled and tapped holes. Okay, so we don't sell these very often because I don't find a need to. There are hollow metal frames that take 1 3/8 doors. The shore of Lake Michigan in Chicago, you know, starting in the Gold Coast and all the way up to basically the Loyola Evanston type border, it's full of 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 story condo buildings, hollow metal frames, built in the 60s, 70s, 1 3/8 doors, 3.5 inch hinges. That's where I see those. Where someone's doing something that's 3.5, you got to be dealing with an 1 3/8 door would be my guess. This is the piece of equipment that you're going to stick in behind the frame or inside the door, and you're going to weld it in place. So let's take some basic dimensional properties of this and let's then move on. Overall height of the plate is 8.5 inch. Overall width, about 1 1/16 inch, as you can see. This is for sure going to be a pocket that's going to be appropriate for a 3.5 inch hinge. You can see where my tape measure is kind of straddling all of those screws, 3.5 inch. Okay. Thickness of the plate, 0.134 thick. This is intended for a hinge leaf that's 120 thousandths thick. So the distance from the flat end down to the recessed area is where that's going to come into play. Okay, that little giddy up you see, that's your 0.12 inch. I don't have an elegant way to really measure that. Yeah, I don't have an elegant way to do it. But anyway, it will be intended for commercial grade 3.5 inch hinges. You can do a residential grade and a commercial grade. Residential is about 0.096. Commercial grade in the 3.5 is about 0.12 inch. So this will be meant for a thicker hinge, like maybe a Hager 1279, 3.5 by 3.5 is where you would use this. This is 10 gauge material, so if we converted the thickness I provided earlier, it's going to come out to 10 gauge. That's a little bit flared out at the end, so my caliper is not exactly accurate. Okay. Now, how you're going to go about installing this, it's awfully easy. They say that the offset is a 1/16 of an inch in the extended description. There are going to be some dimples that are going to be here that are going to account for that leaf thickness. So this may or may not work out exactly for your application immediately. This is wipe coat galvanized, by the way. This is not raw steel. If this was raw steel, this would be thoroughly rusted. I'm going to say that this has a galvanized property to it. Now, installation of this material, we would in a shop setting, we would take the frame. We would either cut, grind, or punch the hinge prep in the jam leg. There are tools for doing it. You can do it with I've done it with everything from a die grinder to a really expensive hydraulic die set, a punch press. However you get that prep, you're going to prep the rabbet of the frame and then a bit of the face of the frame as well. We would take that jam and flip it over, and you're going to access the plate from the inside, from the back side, from the throat of the jam. But before you do that, what we would do is we'd take this hinge plate and get it placed inside of the frame, and we would literally take a 3.5-inch shop hinge and just screw it down to the plate and then position the plate where we want it. And once the hinge is not only placed with the proper hinge back set from the cut to the face of the stop, also checking the vertical location, also checking that the hinge itself is flush with the frame. These dimples sometimes are ground flat to accommodate the material thickness of what you're putting it into. Might require a modification to these dimple tips. There have even been times when we've had to physically flatten this or give it a greater offset to account for an application. So be mindful. This is kind of intended for a 0.12 hinge leaf thickness, but how thick is your jamb? Is it 16 gauge? 18 gauge? Is it an aluminum frame and you're literally going to drill and tap holes into this and then screw it with a flat undercut 1224 machine screw? However you're going to go about doing it is how you do it. But we'd get that put into the frame. We've got a hinge and using it as a handle and also spacing it. And then we would literally weld the plate to the hinge. You've got a nice size hole there. It's probably a good size for a plug weld. If you were going to plug weld, you've already got the hole. If it's a door, we would cut the door, get this plate put in there, and then again add the shop hinge to it, just a half of a hinge leaf, and use that. And we would certainly drill holes through the door first, 2 of them, top and bottom, and we would then plug weld the plate to the door itself. Now, whether it's for a 3.5-inch or a 4-inch or a 4.5-inch, those procedures would be the same for getting it attached to your door or to your frame. In terms of a typical hollow metal distributor shop setting is really how you'd see it. If you do a lot of this stuff, you'll want to invest in a hydraulic punch. There is a company in Ohio that I knew many years ago offered that tooling already ready to go. I'd have to try to do some research to find out if they're still around. I expect that they are. They were at that time in the late 90s, the early 90s, the only company I was aware of who manufactured those die sets, but they are super sweet. If you do volume on having to punch hinge preparations in stick material or in frame material, obviously, you just can't match the clean aspect of that preparation. There's a pretty good table down below this video that will show you all of the different hinge reinforcing plates from Danjo. A relatively complete offering from them. The columns are going to give you offsets, hinge size, hinge weights, the gauge of the material, etc. There is also a link below this video to a document called Template that will allow you to review all the dimensional properties of the item. If you're not sure if your hole locations on your 3.5-inch hinge are going to work, well, those locations are drawn out on that template. Okay. Then there's also a link to the product catalog, and that will allow you to review the entire offering of filler plates and mounting tabs and other accessories from Danjo. Super handy. So if you're in a hollow metal shop, you'll certainly need reinforcements, but you're going to probably need fillers as well. 161 fillers, ASA fillers, 86 edge fillers, 2.125-inch hole fillers, some conversion plates as well, which are neat, and their other filler plates, etc. Now finally, there's a link below this video to the manufacturer's page where you can pull up not only all of the Danjo products that we sell, but also a link to the manufacturer's website, as well as a link to the full product catalog. If you have any questions on the Danjo, this is their part number HR-100 raw steel hinge plate. And again, it is certainly made of steel, or any other Danjo product. Please feel free to reach out to us. And thank you.